Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. You pull into a manufacturing plant, you have positive intentions for your day, and when you leave, you didn't get done what you intended. We struggle to take the action you need to take to get your desired outcome. This may seem normal, or could it be an intention deficit disorder? Intention deficit disorder. This feeling is definitely something I've struggled with. I feel better about it after talking with my friend, Jon Giganti, and talking about his book, With Intention. And Jon's a friend, a professional speaking colleague, an amazing human being. Welcome to the show, Jon.
Thanks, Trev. Great to be here, man. With you.
And actually, you kind of welcomed me here in Columbus, Ohio, recording in this cool studio I don't always get to do. So
it's good to have you.
Thanks for welcoming me here.
Thanks for coming down.
So this is something that is really a topic that gets brought up to me, and we just have a lot of conversations on, is important versus urgent, right? Like, we know this is something that we need to work on. In manufacturing, it's really hard because there's production demands, there's questions, there's customer demands, there's shareholder demands, and everything comes at you through the day. So this whole, hey, I intended to do this, I know it's important, I just don't have time. And where does this all start from with you, this with intention?
Wow. Okay. So could be a deep question and a deep answer. I'll probably go back to when I was a kid, in all honesty. So I was an athlete growing up. I played all sports, but really started to focus on soccer once I got into high school, and then played college ball. And the structure of having to, I remember my freshman year of high school, I went to an all-boys high school in Cleveland, which was a godsend because no girls. Mm-hmm. So there were two things I pretty much focused on: school and soccer. So I remember I had to take my bus ride was about an hour-long bus ride to get to school too. So I got in the habit of essentially studying and then training for soccer. That's all I really thought about, all I did. So bus ride to school for an hour, I'd study for a test or whatever it was. If I'm going to soccer practice at night, so outside of like the high school season in the States is in the fall. So when I would get into the winter season for indoor soccer, I'd have a 45-minute drive to soccer practice. Well, guess what? I would bring my studies with me, and I would study for a spelling test or whatever it was. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was learning a lot of great, I would say, habits and just the rituals around, if you want to get, and we talked a little bit before this about kind of slowing down to speed up. We're talking about, and just the power of tiny improvements and just the process of it. Like over time, like those 30-minute increments of studying, for example, weren't that long of a time, but over the course of a couple months or a couple of years, that became like a lot of great habits and great knowledge. So I did really well in school for those 2 years, but there's a flip side to this and a learning to this. I transferred after my sophomore year to a different school.
With girls,
co-ed school. And so I went from like in the US, I don't know how they do it in Canada, but it's like a 4.0 scale in high school. So, and you can get higher credits if you have like AP classes or whatever. So I think I was like fifth in my class at this St. Ed's is a school, very well-known school in Cleveland. I was crushing it. I was doing so well, but I'm telling you, it wasn't because of intelligence. It was because of the effort. I just was in the mix of it every single day. And when I transferred and discovered, this co-ed school, I still had soccer, which I loved, but schools went to crap, frankly. So I just didn't put the effort in. Didn't put the time. And I think my GPA went down to like a 3.4, and it was fine. Like I still was able to get by, but those were the seeds of intention that I didn't realize at the time, but those were the habits that I realized. And the interesting part was I was able to go from, to me, it's all practice, right? And it's all just showing up and doing the work. And over time, those add up. It's almost like compound interest over time too. When you break that cycle and break that chain, you kind of lose that. So I still had it in soccer because I was training every day. But the other interesting part too, and I talk about this quite a bit, I didn't realize, I just, from the time I was 3 years old, I started playing the game. So my parents would drive me to practice until, I started driving at 16, and they drive me to the game and whatever else. And that's all I knew. So although I was being intentional and I was getting, you think about like Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours and outliers, which I know is being debated now. Does that really matter? But I certainly had way over 10,000 hours of playing, but I don't feel like I was that intentional purposefully, meaning like it wasn't me. Now I love the game, so I wanted to go, but I also it was almost like it was just part of life. So I've had to almost relearn later on in life of like, oh, to really be great at something, you got to really work at it.
So was it getting routine for you?
Yeah, it's all I knew, right? So I don't think routine is the right word because I loved it. So it's not like it was boring or anything else. It's just it took maturity to later on in life realize, oh, I got pretty darn good at something because I was going at it every single day. And I've just found later, I'm 47 now. So anything I've been able to do, whether it's write a book, anything, it's sales, anything with my family, it's because I've shown up and just put the work in. It's not about intelligence. It's not about anything else. It's honestly about just showing up and just serving and adding value, right? And just this whole intention to me is a really important word because it's about, I don't think it's that hard, frankly. And it's a simple concept, but it's not necessarily, let me take back. It is hard. It's not easy. It's a simple concept, but it's not easy to execute on a consistent basis. And that's where intention for me is just this idea of finding what those priorities are and then really living into it as much as possible.
So I feel that in manufacturing, we're coming in and it may feel routine. And even if you like it, it may feel like another day of manufacturing. And you're coming in, you're a leader in manufacturing, but are you intentional on what kind of a leader you want to be? Are you intentional that the concept of that impermanence of like yesterday is different than today? And what am I doing today that's important to grow this development of myself and more importantly, elevate others around me, which is in leadership, which is a concept, right? So are we being intentional or are we coming in and saying, yep, it's another day? Well, it's not just another day. It's a new day. It's a different day. And how are we being intentional when we come in to make that impact? And I think that's where I kind of resonate with what you're saying is that, there's leaders that I work with that work 12 hours a day, John, and they can't, or they're not able to find that time to focus on something that's maybe more important. It's going to feed them in the long term rather than the output of the day. So if this leader's driving into work right now, and they're like, okay, John, in my shoes, maybe I can't read that on the way to work. Well, maybe you listen to the podcast on the way to work, and that's being a little intentional. And you're hearing this today. But if they're coming in and they know that the whirlwind's gonna take them up on the kickoff meeting, and then that leads to the first hour of production. It's really important, and then it's the production meeting, and then there's this other someone needs help over here. So what are your thoughts on how do we be intentional for what's important for us when we start that day?
Yeah. So first of all, I think you got to do the work to know yourself. So it's a self-awareness piece. So what's important to you? So you hit on something earlier that I wrote down, elevate others around you. So if you think about, if you have this, I call it a contribution mindset or servant leadership. It's kind of cliche, but there's truth to that. So I would argue if that's your intentionality that, hey, I want to serve. So if I'm leading a manufacturing facility and no matter what, I want to serve. Well, I think you got to also, and I talk about this in the book, I talk about self-intention versus others' intention. And what I'm arguing is that they're both really important. So in order to serve others, you have to serve yourself too. You have to build into yourself. So you think about you fly in an airplane. What does the flight attendant tell you?
Put on your mask first.
Put on your oxygen mask first. So if you're there with a 2-year-old, no, you don't put theirs on first. You put yours so then you can serve them in case they need you. I think about this stuff the same way. So if I'm driving into a facility, how did I fuel myself for the day? Did I eat something that's nutritious and, something that's going to give me the right energy? Did I work out whatever that routine is. Everybody's a little different. I'm not saying everybody has to wake up at 4 a.m. and work out either. I don't necessarily believe that. But did I spend time with my family? Did I have breakfast with my family? Whatever that may be. Did I listen to a podcast? Did I read a book? It's different for everybody. But are you setting yourself up for success?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, success is different for everybody, but how I define success is not necessarily outcomes for myself. It's how do you, what you said, how do you elevate other people around you? And to me, and I've watched some of your stuff and heard some of your podcasts. I love what you talk about, that connection piece. And I know you talk a lot about emotional intelligence, and that's the magic. You can be smart as anybody, but if you don't have the EQ, the emotional intelligence piece nailed down, it's not sustainable over time. I know that I'm in sales, so I've had years where I've been very successful, but I used to be a pretty selfish sales guy. And it's very easy in business to get selfish. You want results. You're competitive. You were a hockey player. I was a soccer player. You're trained to win. So
I want my line to get the most amount of parts. Right? I want my shift to do the best. I want my plant to make the most.
And is that bad?
I think with balance.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's a yes and.
Yeah, it's a yes and. I love it. Yeah, because we need those runners that can lead and show that the shift does well. But the other two shifts, if they're not producing, and we've seen this over and over in plants, that's not helpful. It's not sustainable, right? Where it's interesting because I do focus on self-awareness, but I didn't really connect it to the intention. If your intention is to be a leader in manufacturing, what is your self-intention as far as how are you investing in yourself? Because one of the things is that the feeling of guilt of maybe going into the office and taking some space to just write some stuff down, think about your plan for the week, do some of that long-term thinking, because why is it? Because when we go on the floor and we're helping and we are involved in whatever it may be, whether it's a breakdown or whether we're just trying to get more throughput or a quality issue, then it's we feel like we've contributed. And then we go home and we feel, okay, I was on the floor, it was a busy day, it flew by, it was a great day. Oh, well, hold on a minute. But I didn't do anything really intentionally for myself or the future of the team. I think that's the real struggle. And I think it is maybe that self-awareness and maybe that longer term vision of if I want to be an intentional leader, I got to schedule some time to do that.
Yeah.
And know that it's an investment in the future, like saving money.
Yeah. I mean, it all adds up, right? It's just, I don't want to take away from the fact that results don't matter. They do matter. You have to get results, but to get sustainable results the right way is all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You've got too many people in corporate America are burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know you've talked about the Gallup poll that 1/3 of all North American employees are actually engaged.
Yeah.
The burnout rates are through the roof. I mean, it's crazy. We could get into all the mental health stuff too, but it's been a hard couple of years. Let's just call it what it is. And so, the more we can get people focusing on how do you fuel yourself to put you in the right position for success, I think the better. And again, the service piece to me is the most important piece. Whether it's at work, which I get, this is for manufacturing folks, sure. But for family too. So if you're running and gunning all day and you work let's call it a 10-hour day, and you're crushed and you're so tired and you get home and all you want to do is sit in front of a TV or doom scroll on your phone or have a couple bourbons or whatever. And I'm not saying any of that's all bad. Sometimes it's okay to watch Netflix and whatever else.
Absolutely.
But if you're doing it at the detriment of your family time and being there for your family, that's where over time that becomes a challenge.
Yeah, where you need to, it's just that balance, right? Breaking some time throughout your day to do that so that, you're not, I've heard you talk about that as well, where, and what time of day you decide to spend some of that time is important because your energy level is not the same. Your focus isn't the same all throughout the day. I know sometimes when 6 p.m. hits, and maybe I got up at 3 or 4 a.m. It is Netflix time.
Yeah, sure.
Just because I just feel spent. So how you spend your intentional time makes me think of one of the leaders that really does and is connecting with his team more. But again, the day will fly by, and it's well, I never did really have that one-on-one, or I never did do that positive record of employment just to kind of document that great moment, just because the day got away. So they started, when they pull into work, just taking a stick-it note or write in their own book. I think it was writing in their own book of just today I want to be intentional on this, right? Just kind of like keeping that. And then when you leave, opening up that book and just looking at it and say, did I do this one action for myself? And it seems to be working for them. And it doesn't work for everybody. But what have you seen that maybe someone in manufacturing can apply to make sure that we can focus on something that's important to us? Any techniques?
Yeah, I mean, to get really tactical, I like that. I like that the premise of getting something in front of your face, whether it's a Post-it note or a notebook or whatever it is. I'll pull out my phone and show you, and you can't, not everybody can see this, but I have on the front of my phone, it's the way, and I have 3 things: confident, fearless, and joyful. So this is a reminder for me every day that, all right, no matter what, I'm going to be confident, I'm going to be fearless, and I'm going to be joyful.
Love that.
And so, for me, I have to trick my brain a little bit too. Like, this will get stale after about 30 days or so. So I'll have to find a different format or whatever else to do it. And it's just, we all have different ways we operate. But I think there's something around, like, whether it's affirmations or I love to write. So, and handwrite, I think there's research on this, that handwriting's better than putting something in a computer or an iPad or whatever. Yeah. There's something that sears in the brain. So if you have, a page in a notebook that, hey, here are my standards, or here are my beliefs, and you got to review it quite a bit. And it actually takes me back to some work I did with an executive coach a few years ago. So they had a great company based here called Built to Lead. Chet Scott's a guy that runs it. He wrote a book, Becoming Built to Lead, which I highly recommend. But their whole thing is you work on your core. So you work on your standards and your beliefs before you do anything. So, and I have it in the book, a list of it's like 35 or so standards or beliefs that I have. And those took a couple years to rinse. Like, you come up with anybody can come up with, hey, what are my top 2 or 3 standards or beliefs? Everybody can do that. And I recommend that. But over the course of time, you start to build like bricks onto that, and it becomes a foundation of, this is who I am. It becomes what's your identity? And so I review that pretty consistently. I have it printed out, and it's just become an important piece. And guess what? I'm not perfect at it. There are a lot of times I review that thing and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm falling short here, and here. But again, go back to the awareness of it. It's that process of being aware and knowing, okay, and you can't work on 35 different things at one time, but it is, I think, important to figure out what you believe, what you stand for, what's your identity, and then that. And if you say, hey, I'm someone that starts my day by working out, or I fill my bucket by eating the right foods, fuel. I'm going to fuel for performance, I like to call it. Then let's say you have a bad day today. That's okay. Show up tomorrow and see if you can win the day. People spend too much time trying to, this is why New Year's resolutions don't work, because everybody makes an incredible New Year's resolution as they're watching college football or whatever it is. On the couch on New Year's, I'm going to do this, I'm going to join this gym, and then 3 weeks later, like, the gyms are empty. Yeah. So it's just, and this is why I think Atomic Habits, we've talked about, is so James Clear's hit it, because he simplified what everybody's thinking and the whole premise and the whole concept around, habits are about your identity. So if you want to be a writer, just show up today and write 200 words or 20 words, and then show up tomorrow and do it again, and then again. And then again, and over time, you're like, you can have a lot of words written. It's like how many podcasts do you have?
You're going to be, I think, 100, 102, 103.
Incredible, right? So every 2 weeks for the last 3 years?
4 years.
4 years. Yeah. That's such a great accomplishment, but it's a great example of just showing up, serving, and just over time, all of a sudden, I bet you when you were at 5, you were like, man, 100, it's pretty far away.
Not even had a hard time to envision it. Just trying to get through the next one, right? And not knowing what we're doing, and to have met you now and being in a real podcast room.
It's an honor to have you here.
Yeah, so you're making me think different, Jon. So I'm sure it's going to be impacting the leaders, because, I'm thinking about this podcast and having you on, and I'm thinking about, okay, we all need help being more intentional when we start, and, whether it's writing it down. But it is, and I've read your book a couple times. I got a book report on the website on it. And I still kind of need to sink that in more. It's like, if you want to be intentional, it does start with self-awareness. And it's funny, because I say that in leadership and manufacturing, it starts with self-awareness. But if you want to be intentional, what is your identity? Yeah. And your actions define that. So whether it's, I working out has become part of me now, where I just, every morning I do some type of workout, usually 5 to 6 times a week, just because that's just what I do. As soon as I know I'm putting those gym shoes on, I'm going to work out. I've never dressed up to work out and then not worked out, right? It's kind of that first step. Or maybe when you talk about writing, and that's something that I'm just starting to do now, is getting into a regular writing process. So if we want to identify ourselves as a mindful leader in manufacturing, and we named it this because, are we being mindful, which is just being aware of what we're doing, which is just being self-aware. And if I identify as a leader that serves and connects with the team, what are the small steps that I'm doing every day to represent that? So am I putting that as a priority? And then where is that in my day? Because I can't say that I'm a leader. Oh yeah. Because when I smile at people and I say hello, but that the relationships is it's deeper than that, right? So it's like, how am I having deeper questions, more curiosity? When things aren't going well, our default is to put on more pressure when we actually need to kind of like step back for a minute, lean in, be more curious, and identify with ourselves. So it makes so much sense what you're saying, because I don't normally look at it that way. Yeah. And I should.
Yeah.
That if my identity is, and I feel like I'm the person that connects with people. And I had dinner with my daughter last night, and it's a relationship. We all have different family relationships that we work on, and I really worked on just being more intentional, more curious, and not so much being a dad, but just being someone that connects with another person that you love and care about. Yeah. So how can we do that with our teammates?
Yeah. Okay. So can we go even one step? Because you and I were in HPS, Royal Public Speaking together. And in your speech, you tell a phenomenal story about seeing your son.
Yeah.
Right? Can you share that?
Yeah.
Maybe you have a million times on this podcast. I don't know, but.
Yeah. And it's when I'm realizing that, you don't get better at work without getting better at home.
Yeah.
And what I've learned in professional speaking is that I have all these great work stories.
Yeah.
And really, some of the deeper stories and the better stories are the personal ones. Sure. And the one that Dyson, my son, gave me permission to share is that moment of going into his apartment and walking in to get a glass of water, and I see that countertop camouflaged with dirty dishes, and I look at him and say, "Man, you need to do some dishes." And it's just like on the manufacturing line, like we need to make some parts. And then that creates the disconnect, right? That night, I'm just thinking about the place is a mess and we're not connecting, and the dishes didn't get done either. Like it was just like, but for some reason we feel that intention of saying, "Hey, you need to do the dishes" is the right approach. And then when we come back, and then when I come back the next time, the dishes are still there. And then, you're just looking, whether it's your teammate, in this case, my son, and like, how are you doing? What's going on? And then when he comes back with, "Man, I'm struggling. I'm stressed out at school. I'm kind of hanging on right now. I just broke up with my girlfriend. I could use your help." It's like, oh man, really? I'm glad it happened then, and now I can do it more. But it's like, where are those micro moments that we miss, right? Like those deeper questions, those great conversations.
So, okay. So let me jump in, because I turn the tables on you a little bit, Nash, because it's a powerful story. I mean,
Thanks, John.
Every time you tell it, I've seen you tell it a couple times, and it's very powerful. Why can't we operate like that in business? Right. So, and I know you talk about this, but this is it. This is the holy grail, in my opinion, of business. And I've run sales teams for a long time, but knowing, and I've been not the best leader at times, and I think a pretty decent leader at times. But I would say if you talk to my team, they'd probably say, "You know what? It's Jon provides a safe place to connect, and I'm not." Look, again, we got to get results, but usually performance, there's something behind poor performance. Yeah. Of course, there's going to be times when someone just doesn't have the ability, but more often than not, it's something's going on in their life. So with your son, right? Like I've got the messy kitchen is just a byproduct of a root cause that's causing something. So as leaders, we have to get curious about our teams and try and get deeper and understand what makes them tick and what they're struggling with and what they're great at too. There's a huge piece of that. I love all the Strengths Finder stuff. I'm a big proponent of that. How can you help people live into that stuff more often too? But I think to me, it comes down to trust. If you can build, and it's just sports too. I mean, I guarantee you've experienced this in hockey, and we've seen this in any team. Like the best teams are not always, the championship teams are not always the best teams. They're typically the most connected teams. You got to have talent, but the connection piece. And I played on a ton of teams that have had great connection and some that haven't. And so to me, it's just the trust factor. And look, man, I'm not a perfect dad either. My son's going through some stuff in his soccer season where he's not playing as much as he feels like he deserves. And frankly, knowing the game when I watch, yeah, he probably should be playing more. But I'm trying to coach him up, like keep grinding, keep showing up, be so good they can't ignore you type mindset, right?
I love that.
Like so he's had some frustration with his coach. And I've said, he wins if you let this like get the best of you and this, stop playing, for example. And not to call out the coach exactly, but it's just we have to own our mindset, right? And I talk about agency in the book. This is the second step in the with intention wheel. This awareness is first and then agency second. There's a reason for that. Self-awareness to me is the catalyst for everything, but you've got to take ownership of your past, present, future to really be able to, to succeed and serve the way people want to do that.
I love that about your son, because there's going to be that coach, there's going to be that boss.
Always, absolutely.
Right? So it's like, okay, so we can either try to circumvent the situation, which in manufacturing, I see it as like, okay, let's just push the parts through, right? Let's put some tape on that whip so it keeps on welding. Let's do something to that part so it does pass the fixture. Let's just get your son playing more. But if we can kind of focus on like what's beneath that, right? What's beneath that is our own mindset, and it's also like what's really going on, right? And if we can get that resilience of I'm just going to keep playing, and this is what I own. And then if you're a leader, because the question I get sometimes when speaking, it's like, hey, but our manufacturing environment is like this. If I want to be more curious and have deeper conversations, how do you change that culture? I say it starts with your own conversation, right? It's like, don't underestimate how your own grind and your own identity and how you show up every day is impacting others.
Sure.
And they won't see it, right? You got to kind of stay to that core value. And that's where I kind of like pull back to, what is your identity, right? And those actions, you own those actions. And so many times, John, that my identity became my boss's identity. Because I started to emulate those behaviors. I started to put more pressure on leaders, right? Because it's kind of like, okay, I feel the pressure is being put on me. Well, I'm going to do the same. That's why I say working the person at the top of the organization does have a bit more of an impact because of that whole trickle effect, the chocolate fountain, I like to call it, comes down.
I like
and we're going to start to affect everybody. So when we're a little bit more intentional on, what do I own in this? What's my intention? And how I want to make you feel. Is how we make each other feel is how we can engage. So I came on here thinking more tactical. Even today, when I was preparing for this podcast, I was thinking more tactical. So thank you for making me think a little bit deeper.
Sure, absolutely.
To hear more from Jon Giganti and showing up with intention, tune in a couple weeks for part 2. Hey folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.